Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Virtual Ninja Show. My name is Andrew Mathu. I'm a product manager in the Azure Network Security Customer Experience Engineering team, and I'm excited to be your special guest host today. In this episode, we are covering Azure Firewall, discussing how it helps secure modern cloud networks. We look at some common use cases, key features, and the best practices that make it a critical part of enterprise security. Joining me today is Shabaz Shaik. Shabaz, please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and what you do at Microsoft.
Hello, everyone. This is Shabaz. I'm a product manager in the Azure Network Security Customer Experience Engineering team here at Microsoft. We deal with Azure Firewall, Azure WAF, and Azure DDoS protection products. And today we'll be covering about Azure Firewall and its key features.
So great. Thanks for joining us, Shabazz. So to start us off, can you give us a quick overview of Azure Firewall, what it is and where it fits into the broader Azure Network Security stack?
Sure. Azure Firewall is a cloud native firewall as a service that comes with built in high availability and unrestricted cloud scalability. So it can protect your cloud workloads by filtering malicious traffic that is traversing your network. It offers layer 3 to layer 7 threat protection along with network address translation capabilities for filtering both east, west, and north south traffic. By combining Azure Firewall with a WAF, which is a web application firewall, and DDoS protection, we can actually get best in class network security. And organizations can ensure that they can have robust defense against cyber threats by this.
Great. So building on that, why is Azure Firewall a critical component for securing modern cloud networks, especially in enterprise environments?
Yeah. Any public IP or application that is exposed to the internet is vulnerable to various threats and attacks, right? And also, proper network segmentation and access controls are really important to avoid any internal threats. So, it becomes essential to have a robust network security strategy for protecting enterprise applications. So, this is where Azure Firewall comes into the picture. It offers advanced threat protection using IDPS, TLS inspection, threat intelligence features. So, moreover, its central policy management and high availability and scalability will make it a top choice for securing modern applications.
Okay, that's great to know. And when it comes to deployment, can you explain how Azure Firewall is typically deployed and what are the most common architectures?
Sure, definitely. So, one of the common architectures we have is hub and spoke. So, Azure Firewall is placed in the central hub virtual network, and multiple spoke virtual networks are peered to this hub. So, all the traffic between the spokes or to the internet or to any on premises networks, it is routed through the firewall using user defined routes. So, this allows centralized security policy enforcement and traffic inspection across the environment. Now, the other type is building upon that, we have virtual VWAN setup. So, virtual VWAN is nothing but Azure Firewall is integrated into a secured virtual hub within this VWAN. So, in this model, the firewall provides security for all connected virtual networks and branch offices. But this time, the routing and everything is done automatically. So, this setup simplifies management and scales easily for global distributed and enterprise networks.
Okay, thanks for the overview of the common architectures. So once you have the Azure Firewall deployed either in the hub and spoke architecture or V1 architecture, what are some of the key features of Azure Firewall? What are those features that Azure Firewall brings in?
Yeah, some of the important features of Azure Firewall include high availability and cloud scalability. And on top of that, we have the layer 3 to layer 7 filtering, where Azure Firewall enables granular control at both network and application layers. And then we have the centralized policy management. And on top of that, we also have advanced threat protection features like threat intelligence based filtering, intrusion detection prevention system, and TLS inspection. With the help of these features, I think Azure Firewall is one of the best firewalls available in the market in the cloud environments.
So when it comes to actual threat protection, how does Azure Firewall handle real-time filtering and blocking of malicious traffic?
Sure. So Azure Firewall uses Microsoft's threat intelligence to identify and block malicious traffic. So it supports like URL and FQDN filtering as well as signature based intrusion detection prevention that blocks attacks in real time. On top of this, the firewall also supports like TLS inspection to analyze encrypted traffic. This real-time inspection ensures that both known and emerging threats are detected and mitigated before they can impact cloud resources.
Okay. That's awesome. So, for customers evaluating options, what are the different SKUs or versions are available for Azure Firewall, and how can customers decide on which one to use?
Sure. Azure Firewall is available in three different SKUs. The first one is Basic SKU. This is designed for small to medium businesses supporting up to 250 Mbps throughput and essential security capabilities. And then we have the Standard SKU, which is suitable for most enterprise workloads, offering advanced layer 3 to 7 filtering and real time threat intelligence and higher throughput. And then finally, we have the Western class premium SKU, which is intended for highly sensitive or regulated environments, adding features like TLS inspection, intrusion detection and prevention, and advanced URL filtering. So customers should select a SKU based on their throughput requirements, security needs, and budget.
Okay, that's awesome. So, now let's go into how it's configured. What are the different rule sets? What are the rules that we can configure within Azure Firewall?
Yeah, that's a great question. Azure Firewall supports like three main types of rules. The first one is network rules. These rules are used for controlling traffic based on source and destination IP addresses, ports, and protocols. Right. The next ones we have is application rules. These are for filtering HTTP, HTTPS, and SQL based traffic. And this can be filtered on the basis of FQDNs and URLs. Right. And the final type of rules that we have is DNAT rules. So these rules are used for allowing inbound traffic by mapping public IP addresses to private IPs, enabling secure access to internal resources. So these rules are organized into collections and prioritized to ensure precise control over network flows.
And from your experience, what are some common misconfigurations or pitfalls that you have seen, and how can teams avoid them?
Sure. Some common misconfigurations include incorrect rule priorities, like not setting the correct order can lead to unintended access or blocked traffic. So, always reviewing and adjusting rule priorities carefully is really important. And then the second one we have is overly permissive rules. Broad allow rules can expose resources unnecessarily. So, we have to apply the principle of least privilege and restrict rules to only what is necessary, right? Then we have
Mhm.
the user defined routes configured incorrectly. So basically, some of the returning traffic to the firewall doesn't go to the firewall. That's because of not configuring the user defined routes properly. Then finally, one more thing to take a note of is that failure of enabling advanced threat prevention features like threat intelligence, IDPS, TLS inspection. So not enabling these features can leave the environment vulnerable to known threats. So these are some of the misconfigurations that can happen.
Okay. So let's shift gears a bit. Let's go into troubleshooting. For example, when things don't go as expected, what are some common tips or techniques that you can use to troubleshoot traffic traversing through the Azure firewall?
Yeah, so for effective troubleshooting, we have to make use of some of the features that we have available in Azure Firewall. The first one is diagnostic settings on Azure Firewall, where we can take a look at various types of logs like network logs, IDPS logs, threat intel logs, and also flow trace logs. So these logs will help us to diagnose connection issues and also to look at failed TCP handshakes. And then we also have policy analytics. This will help us to analyze which rules are not being utilized and is there any overly restrictive policies or any broad rules. We can identify all of that using policy analytics. Then we have latency probe metrics. This will help us with monitoring for performance bottlenecks or delays. So these are some of the important items to look at for troubleshooting. On top of this, for monitoring purposes, we can make use of Azure Firewall Workbook, which will give us a single dashboard for looking at all these logs in a single page and analyzing our firewall traffic. And moreover, we can also make use of Sentinel solution for Azure Firewall to configure automated threat detection and remediation. And this is really useful in scenarios where you want to have automated remediation for some predetermined attacks or for some analytic rules that you've already configured. And finally, we have the Azure Network Watcher, which will help you with some of the connections information and traffic flow within your environment. So these are really good features to take a look at and which will help you out with troubleshooting.
Okay, that's pretty fantastic. Thank you for sharing those tools and also integrations. So maybe also what I can ask is, based on your experience, what are your top three best practices for organizations deploying Azure Firewall at scale?
Sure, that's a great question. So, number one is deploying it in a hub and spoke model, preferably in a VLAN if possible. So this centralizes security management and simplifies policy enforcement across multiple virtual networks. And then enabling the threat protection features. A lot of customers miss on this. So this is really important to enable all the features that are available on Azure Firewall. And then optimize and regularly review rules. So this is also an important task to do. We have to look at redundant rules, prioritize critical policies, and regularly audit our rules in order to stay ahead of any threats in our environment.
Okay. So finally, can you walk us through a quick demo of Azure Firewall in the Azure portal? Maybe you can highlight some key features and how teams can monitor events in real time.
Sure. So let's take a look at this page here. This is the Azure portal where we have our firewall open. And if you look at this overview page, we have some of the important details that are currently available. For example, we can get the information like this is a premium SKU firewall, and we have the public IP assigned here, and this is the private IP, and some of the management subnet information is available here. And on top of this is this section called firewall policy, where we can see what is the policy that has currently been assigned to this firewall, right? And apart from that, we can also get summary of information like what rules have been configured and what are the threat intelligence, TLS inspection, and IDPS configurations that we currently have in this policy, right? Apart from that, on this page, if we come to diagnostic settings, this is where we can actually set up our logs for Azure Firewall. For example, if I open this setting, which we have already configured here, we can see that some of the important logs for monitoring and troubleshooting the traffic in Azure Firewall, they're being sent to this log analytic workspace, which we are using for the demo, right? So this is where you want to choose any logs from the resource specific logs that you want in your environment and configure the setting accordingly. So this is really helpful in the case of troubleshooting. And there are also some metrics for Azure Firewall that you can make use of. But generally, these are the monitoring details that we have on this page. Now, if I go to the firewall page again, I would like to take a look at the policy that is assigned here. So let me go to the policy. So this is the policy, and as we can see here, the policy tier is premium, and TLS inspection is enabled, and IDPS mode is also set up here. But where exactly we configure all of these details is that if you come to this left section, there are two sections here. One is for rules and one is for settings. So rules is where you configure all the network, DNAT, and application rules. For example, if I take a look at network rules, we can find all the network rules that have been configured in this section. For example, what is the source, what is the destination, and what are the protocols that are being allowed here, right? So this type of information is available here. And if you want to edit this rule, you can edit that as well, depending upon what you're configuring here. You can choose your source and destinations as needed. And then similarly for application rules, you have a tab for application rules where you can configure your application rules for your web traffic and SQL traffic as needed. And you can filter it on the basis of URL filtering or FQDN filtering, right? And finally, DNAT rules. So this is where you configure your network address translation rules, specifically for inbound traffic. So as we can see here, this destination IP is the firewall's public IP. And this is the front-facing IP where all of the traffic is coming in. So when the traffic hits this IP, it will get translated to this private IP address with the help of this DNAT rule. So that is how the inbound traffic kind of comes in and interacts with the local resources within our environment. Now, coming to the settings section, some of the important features that I talked about is threat intelligence feature. So this is where you can configure your threat intelligence, and either you can disable it or alert only, alert and deny. We have it as alert and deny for now. This is basically denying any malicious traffic known on the reputation of the IP or domain, right? And this is based on the Microsoft Threat Intelligence. And then we have the TLS inspection here that we can configure basically for looking at the encrypted traffic and looking for any malicious activity within that encrypted traffic. So this TLS inspection will help us decrypt the traffic and look into it and inspect that traffic and re-encrypt it back before sending to the destination. So this is where we configure the certificate for this TLS inspection, and this is pretty straightforward. We have a lot of documentation available for this, so we can easily configure this on this page. Now, finally, we have the IDPS, which is the intrusion detection prevention. So here we have three modes where we can configure this. We can disable it, we can put it in alert and deny mode. Right now we have it in alert, and we can change it to alert and deny as needed, right? If we look at the signatures that we currently have, we have around 80,000 plus signatures now. And these signatures are updated for any 0-day attacks or anything that we need to update it. And it happens automatically. We don't need to manage it manually, right? And there is a section called bypass list here, where if you want to specifically bypass any particular flow for this IDPS, you can add it here. And therefore, you can bypass the whole IDPS engine there. So there are some configurations like private IP ranges where you can treat some of your on-prem public IPs as private IP ranges. So this is also a simple configuration. And you can modify some of the actions on these signatures as needed, right? So this is the overview of the features. And on top of this, we also have policy analytics. So this is where you will get some information on how you have configured your policy, what are the redundant rules, are there any rules with low utilization, and different categories here. So rules with multiple IP addresses. So we can see that this is the maximum limit for source and destinations. We've only utilized these many. And there are 5 rules with no hits and similar types of insights we can get. So, and also some insights from the potentially malicious sources. So all of this is really helpful. We can go into each tabs here like network rules, DNAT rules, and different traffic flows to take a look at what exactly we are refining in our policy. And we can also do a single rule analysis here. So these are some of the important items. And that's about the overview of Azure Firewall.
Okay. So that's a great overview, Shabazz. Thanks for showing us the rules as well as the threat protection capabilities. Just a quick one on my end. How does a customer know that they've configured these rules correctly? Are there any like sort of recommendations that they can use to ensure that their rule set is working as intended?
Yeah, so that's a great question actually. So if since we are already on the screen here, as we can see, there are policy limits, rules with multiple IP addresses, and low utilization. All of these are here. But if we want to look at the recommendations themselves, there's a tab here called See All Recommendations. So once we click on that, we should be able to get clear insights into each of these categories where we can take further action. So for multiple IP addresses, as we can see, we don't have any data. So that means we have configured our policy in this particular case. But if we look at the low utilization category, so we have quite a few rules here that are talking about this rule was not hit in the specified time period. So this is something we can take a look at and see if this rule is still needed. If not needed, we can go ahead and go for deletion of these rules in the later maintenance periods, right? So similarly, if you look at the duplicated IP addresses, we are doing good here. Nothing is here, but on the redundant rules, also nothing. Let's take a look at generic rules. So some of the generic rules here are listed where it says that the wildcard is found in source addresses. So basically what it's saying is the source is pretty wide. So we need to replace that with a proper prefix list. We want to rather than having a wildcard there, right? So these are some of the recommendations. And also if you look at the potentially malicious sources, here we have a list of malicious sources that we can possibly take into account and create a firewall policy to deny all of these sources, right? So these are some of the things that we can do as part of the recommendations. But if we have more data within this, we can get
Mhm.
more insights around the configuration.
Okay, that's great.
Now, one last thing I wanted to cover here is the logging part of Azure Firewall. So this is the log analytic workspace where we send all of our logs to. So generally, you come to the workspace and you can take a look at specific logs that you're troubleshooting. So for example, I've taken Azure Firewall network rule as an example. This is a network rule table that I'm looking for. And if I run this query here, just the Azure Firewall network rule, I should be seeing some logs in the last 7 days. So these are the logs. So where we get the protocol information, source, destination port, and what action was taken. So these logs are about the denies that happened on the firewall, right? But if I'm particularly looking for a specific destination IP, I can run this query here. So this will give me the log specifically with this destination IP, right? So similarly, there are other tables for logs that we can make use of. These are part of the structured logs for Azure Firewall. So I'm running this particular query here for application rule. And if I run this query, we'll get the logs only with this source IP address, which are hitting the application routes. So as we can see, these are the logs. We can get into the details of each of these logs as needed, right? And finally, we also have a table here for Azure Firewall IDPS signature. So I just want to look at if there were any matches in the IDPS engine and if that was on port 22. So let me run this query. So once I run this, we can see that there are a bunch of matches on destination port 22. And this was IDPS matches. And as we can see the description, it is a potential SSH scan and attempted information leak category. So we can get information like that and we can act upon it as needed. So this is some of the logging information for Azure Firewall. And apart from these three tables I've covered, there are a lot of other tables as well, important tables for DNS proxy logs and threat intelligence and other categories. So feel free to take a look at that when you check out the documentation for Azure Firewall logging.
Thanks, Shabazz, for this overview of the monitoring. So, a quick question: is there another way to view the logs, or do you need to run the KQL query all the time, anytime you want to view the logs?
Sure, that's a good question. So I think you don't need to run the KQL query all the time. There is something called KQL mode or simple mode here. So you can just choose the simple mode and you can select the table you want from whatever the options that are available and give the source IP and port or protocol details and you'll get the logs available here.
Awesome, thank you for that. So let me ask, in terms of visualizing these logs, is there a way, for example, in a real world customer scenario, probably in a SOC, where the customer can be able to visualize these logs so they can be able to see trends and also carry out investigations?
Sure. Yeah, definitely there's a way for that. So if we take a look at this firewall page again, and if we come to this monitoring section, there's a part called workbooks. So if we click on that, we have a workbook available for firewall, which is integrated as a built-in workbook. So you can make use of it. So if I click on that workbook and select the respective workspace that we are using here. So in this case, CyberSoc is the workspace that I have. And once I selected the workspace and last 90 days or whatever time period we want to look at, we'll be getting an overview of different events and throughputs, port utilization, rule hit count, and various categories. So if you want to dig deeper into all of these categories, you can go into different tabs like application rules. So here we get the details of what rules were hit, what was the denied FQDNs over time, and all of the web categories and FQDN details. Similarly, if we go to network rules, we get rule actions, target ports, DNAT actions, and ports. All of these details are available here, which is like a great insight for anyone who's want to take a look at how their firewall traffic is looking like, and it'll be great for any SOC environment.
Awesome, that's great, Shabazz. Thank you, Shabazz, for being my guest in this show. Thank you for the great session and for the great demo. For everyone who tuned in to watch this episode, we hope you found it useful and we hope to see you in the next episode. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.